show there's a way out. Growing up, learn just a little. Yeah, the truth hurts, long burn. Growing up, learn just a little. Learn just a little.
Hi everyone. First of all, apologies again for the confusion around the start time. We started at 4:30 last time and started at 4 this time, but due to my own mistake, I will admit that, I'm not too proud to admit it, we got mixed up in the messages. So thank you very much for your patience if you came here physically and online. And we will start the lecture now with Professor Dr. Verdommerholt.
Thank you, Sanne. Okay, guys, welcome. Welcome to this second event. Welcome to you all here in the auditorium. Welcome also to all of you who are online connected with us for a live stream. I'm very glad to see that so many signed up. It's not only you here, but also overall, I think we have something like 70, 75 people who signed up. It was really, really nice. I'm really happy with that. And that also shows that there is a growing sense of urgency also amongst many participants, students, lecturers, practitioners, in transitioning towards a new economy. And this economy, I rather refer to as not a degrowth economy, although the topic is degrowth today, but an economy that's actually better than growth. And judging by the attention paid to the topic in the media, but also in scientific journals, and by practitioners, we can conclude that the degrowth concept is really gaining traction. And just on my way to Hanze, I also I received a LinkedIn message saying that Jason Hickel will address Dutch Parliament coming Monday. So degrowth is also already in Parliament. So it's really gaining traction. My name, by the way, is Egbert Dommerholt. I'm a professor of bio-based business valorization, or in simple terms, circular economy, here at this university, and I'm the co-organizer of this event together with Sanne de Boer. This event is in the second in a series of 5. As you can see, the previous event was about degrowth in science, featuring Jason Hickel, and that was on the 27th of September. And not only Jason, but also Mr. Powell was one of the keynote speakers. Thank you for being our guest again. The next meeting will be on degrowth and education, featuring Sam de Bruin.
At 4 o'clock again, 4th of November.
24th of November. And the degrowth in law and society on the 15th of December, and in January, the 12th of January, we'll have a debating session with practitioners and students as well. Underlying all these events is the question, will degrowth save the world? And this question actually we borrowed from Jason Hickel's latest book, or most recent book, Less is More, Will Degrowth Save the World? And the book is actually the prime source of inspiration for these lectures. Now, what actually do we want to achieve with these events? Well, first, we want to inform you. And inform you not only about degrowth, but about the developments that we are currently facing. And some of the developments are truly confronting. And more in a sense of, hey guys, this is what it is, and this is something we have to deal with. Meaning that we also want to challenge you to take action, because not all things are looking really bright. So we challenge you to take action, but then you also need to be inspired, and that's also what we want to do today. To inspire you, to inspire you with new ideas from business, but also on other occasions, also governments, universities, and students alike, so lecturers and students alike. Now, you may wonder why a circular economy professor actually organizes these events or co-organizes these events. Well, there are basically two reasons. In random order, first of all, I gave Jason Hickel's book as a Christmas gift actually to all my colleagues, IBS colleagues, but also of the Research Center Bio-Based Economy. And I promised them that I would also organize a series of events focusing exactly on the degrowth topic. So if you make a promise, then you also have to keep it. And that's one of the reasons why we organize this. And the reason I handed out the book in the first place is that I think that we as Hanze University, but not only us, but also other universities and businesses and governments, we need to think about what education will look like in, let's say, 10, 20 years from now. In the face of the current and looming social and environmental developments, what choices do we need to make? What type of students we want to deliver? And what type of research projects do we want to get on board? And my question is, well, let's just discuss this openly and transparently. But not only universities should ask them these questions, because these are just as urgent for business organizations and for governments as well. Okay. The fifth slide, degrowth in business. Well, in the previous event, Jason Hickel defined a degrowth economy as a planned reduction of energy and resource throughput designed to bring the economy back into balance with the living world in a way that reduces inequality and improves human well-being. Well, quite a mouthful, but the focus of today's event is on degrowth and business. And you may wonder whether it is at all possible to run a thriving business whilst at the same time contribute to degrowth. Is it possible to combine degrowth with doing business in the first place? Because traditionally, one of the aims of business is to grow in size, to grow in sales, using more resources, more energy, whilst increasing disharmony with the living world. Now, this afternoon, we will hear contributions of, I think, two wonderful, really wonderful entrepreneurs who will tell you more about their degrowth journey and the challenges, but also the opposition that they are facing. And that's why I'm so very happy, but also very proud. Welcome. I'm also so very proud that Elske Doets and Cécile van Oppen accepted our invitation to be the keynotes for this afternoon. And now I'm handing over to Sanne. Sanne, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Egbert. So yes, I'm Sanne de Boer. I am a communications officer here at the Hanze Hogeschool. Don't worry, you weren't late, we were wrong. And thank you all very much for coming. So today I will be your moderator, which means I will be taking your questions and I will be proposing them to our speakers. Let's see. Yeah. So again, don't worry about the times. We were wrong. We were supposed to start at 4, but we'll be just combining the 2 question rounds. So we'll still finish today at 5:30, and there'll be some drinks and some snacks available for you outside. Now, a few more words about today's session. Degrowth and business often kind of sounds like an unlikely pairing. And we're going to be talking about the impact that companies have on our society and our climate, as already discussed by Egbert Domholt. And in the discussion about climate action, there's often a question whether responsibility should be on the individual consumer or on the government or on big companies and businesses. And it's strange how companies have become so separate from individuals, because in the end, companies are groups of individuals. But the problem, however, is that the aim of the company often supersedes the aim of the individual. So today we'll be hearing from two great speakers who have put their business and impact together and have looked at what impact should businesses have on our society and on our climate. So we'll first be hearing from Elske Doets. And she is the owner of Doets Reizen, and the travel industry is a very interesting topic when it comes to climate impact. She has also started 2 amazing nonprofit organizations, the Young Lady Business Academy and the Buddy System, I believe it was called, for elderly people. And she's written a book called Bloom. Maybe we'll hear some about that. And finally, we also have Cécile van Oppen. She is the co-founder of Copper 8, which is a consultancy, for lack of a better word, based on the environmental impact companies can have. And we're going to start with Elske Doets, so I will give you the floor, Elske.
Thank you, Egbert and Sana, for inviting me to talk this afternoon. You already heard that I'm in travel, so I would like to start with 2 questions for the audience. And I'd like to invite you to think about that during my talk. And then later on, we can talk a little bit more about it when Cécile and me did our stories. To start with a question, travel is a luxury which conflicts with degrowth. Or travel is a necessity which does not conflict with degrowth. So it can be either true, false, or neutral, or a mixture of it. So who am I? By education, I'm a lawyer. But I decided not to practice law because I didn't want to facilitate other people's problems. I really wanted to create things, take risks. So I became an entrepreneur in travel in 2001. And that was a very interesting journey, obviously, because my travel company is focusing mainly on USA and Canada travel, which is far travel, which makes a big negative impact on climate, has a large carbon footprint. I grew the company. I developed Canada as a destination. Very interesting, but also very one-dimensionally, because I was making my clients happy and I was making a lot of money. In 2017, I had the honor to become Businesswoman of the Year, and that was my first wake-up call that things had to be done differently. First of all, it was a great recognition of what I had done with my one-dimensional focus. But second of all, the chair of the jury, she asked me to help other females grow in gender equality, and I decided to found a nonprofit which is called the Young Lady Business Academy, where I help young females between 15 and 24 years old who are still in education, because it's additional to the regular education which we have, to help them free up their ambition to really start pursuing their ambitions, because unfortunately they have a break on their ambitions. And this can be for all ambitions. This can be for entrepreneurial ambitions. This can be for corporate ambitions, scientific ambitions, political ambitions. So it's very wide. And It's all for all education levels and all backgrounds. And after 5 years, I have 500 alumni. I'm very proud of this. I give them a present by organizing this academy because it's free. It's my giving back to society of all the money which I made in the past. But they also learned me a lot because they were my first real wake-up call. Because what I found when I did my first academy in 2017 is that they were not interested in finding a gap in the market like I had done for so many years. They were interested finding or fixing holes in society, holes like climate, inequality, aging populations, migration. And that made me angry at first. And one of my young ladies who attended the first academy, her name is Cécile van Oppen. She was 16 at that time. And her idea was to invent an alternative for palm oil, which we all know is very harmful for climate and which is in a lot of foods. And also, to my regret, also in biofuel at this moment. But yeah, okay. And I really like the idea of Misha, but I found her very idealistic because I told her you have to make money first in order to make the world a little bit better. And she opened my eyes that I was wrong. And my second wake-up call was I'm a co-host at Business News Radio, BNR, on a frequently basis. And I was puzzled by all the inflation indexes, growth indexes, which was talked about every time I was there at the radio. And I was puzzled because I was really questioning myself, does this make people happy? Does this really influence people's well-being? And what does it do with climate? So then my idea of my second book, which is Bloom, was born, and I started to write that book in the fall of 2019. And in this book, there are 15 contagious examples, which are the young ladies of my academy, showing how you can make a start of doing business differently. Because Bloom is a new scenario for growth. So I'm not denying that growth is important, but I think you have to look at it at a different way. You have to take in consideration more stakeholders. You have to take in consideration people's well-being, and you have to make nature, climate an important stakeholder in the strategy of your company. And when I was writing that book in December 19, I finished my first chapter, and then I thought I really have to quit my company, my travel company, because this is a conflict of what I'm writing down right now. So then COVID came along in March 2020, and you can say this was a disaster financially for me as an entrepreneur, but it was a blessing in disguise because it really put me on the floor, literally, to really start not hide under the table and cry because of this COVID crisis where my business went down completely, but to reinvent my business. Because until the COVID crisis, if you look at mobility around the world, mobility had been unlimited. There was overcapacity in cruise ships, in airplanes. Travel was very price accessible. So we could be indulgent. Same with consumption. So during COVID, I obviously had to deal with a crisis in my company, which was a huge crisis because for your understanding, I have a turnover of 30 million euros every year on average. And suddenly everything was collapsing completely. So I had to deal with a lot of travelers. I had to deal with team members who could not, deal with this standstill. But also we started to work as a team in a two-way street to reinvent ourselves. So first of all, we decided to develop a different way of traveling, which is first of all closer destinations. So Scandinavia, Iceland. I must say I had been very much myopic to the potential of these destinations because I recently have traveled to the Lofoten in Norway, and it encompasses a lot of areas of the USA and Canada in one destination, which is only 2 hours away from us. But also Dutch, if they travel, they tend to travel very long, but they are like Japanese. They jump 17 times average per trip if they travel. So if they travel with me, they will do 17 different national parks in 3 weeks. So I started to think and reinvent deep travel where there's less places in one trip, because the core value of my company is that my clients really reconnect with nature and themselves and their close family members who travel with them. And you don't need 17 spots to tick off boxes. You need lesser spots to reconnect with yourselves. Also, we started to offer train travel, and all our trips now have a carbon calculator. So we make clients aware what their carbon footprint is if they travel. And not many companies around the world are offering that. Only one in Denmark is offering that, and we cooperate with Milieu Centraal to make it also viable, that it is correct what we do. And we try to pursue clients really to look not only at Alaska as a destination, but also go to the Lofoten or travel closer by and have a similar experience if you want to travel. Also, we're working with stakeholders in the green kerosene. So it's fuel, airline fuel, but it's really very green. So it's different than the sustainable airline fuel, where there's also palm oil included. And we are also supporting Pacific Wild, which is a non-profit, which is trying to preserve forests from Vancouver to Alaska. That's a moderate rainforest. So we don't like to replant trees, but we like to preserve forests. So all my travelers are contributing, and I'm always contributing the amount. So yeah, we're doing a lot to change, and also my whole vision of my company is changed. So it means that we really want to change our far travel to closer travel, so in a couple of years. And to our opinion, in our strategy, profit is not our main focus. Our main focus is people, planet, and then profit can be a consequence of that. But that we also like to share with nature, like we do, for instance, with Pacific Wild. And also I'm sharing my profit with my non-profits, the Young Lady Business Academy and Buddy Bolt, because that I finance myself. So, but yeah, how does the hospitality or tourism industry react to my opinion that I like to be smaller or offer different ways of traveling, that I like to take climate as a stakeholder in my strategy? They are very much in a puzzled way reacting. So they can be angry. They were angry at me during COVID that I was saying things about degrowth in the media. They didn't like my transition. So they are very much focused on quantity above quality. they are very much focused on a one-dimensional business model. And unfortunately, tourism industry is very short-term focused. For instance, I do a lot of business with the USA, and they have a window of focus of only a couple of weeks. So how on earth can you change or make a transition if your focus is only a couple of weeks or a couple of months? Then your only focus is money. So there's a lot of tension in my industry, but I'm keeping my conversation going. So I'm writing this book, but for instance, this morning I had a meeting with one of my business partners who is based in New Zealand, but I do business with them in Canada and in the USA. And New Zealand is very much ahead of the game with sustainability. So we will develop a pact to start a discussion with all the important stakeholders in the USA and Canada to start this conversation about how can we deal with our negative footprint on climate and how can we make that more positive. So, but yeah, it's very exciting, but also it makes me crying sometimes that they are so short-sighted. But this today I'm hopeful because today my focus was really talking to this business partner that we said our goals should not be resistance, but our goals should be cooperation with each other instead of being unfriendly competition about numbers and money. So now, if you look back, COVID is nearly 2 years ago. In what direction are we going? So if you look at the lines at our national airport Schiphol, you can really conclude that we are back in old reflexes. And you can see, okay, everything what I predicted is wrong because I predicted we were in an uncontrolled mobility before COVID. We could travel very cheap and very accessible. But we found after COVID that we entered a period of controlled mobility because of the pandemic, but also a controlled mobility because of personnel challenges at the airports, but also at hotels and other suppliers. But you see that governments are also coming with regulations on travel. It is no longer uncontrolled or unlimited. There is a limitation on what you can do. So that is some of my predictions which became true, but I must say that I see this year as an interbellum, and now we are moving forward to a period of more controlled mobility, which the current actual situation is really helping to slow down our industry because the supply chain is under pressure. The war is pressuring everything. The regulations of the government are pressuring our numbers if you want to focus on numbers. And the workforce, which is not granted the way they should be granted, that's example is Schiphol is very clearly, if we do not change our attitude towards that, in tourism, there's still a lot of slavery. For instance, I'm not selling cruise holidays because this can be so cheap because of all the slavery on board of the cruise ships. So I don't want to be part of that. But still, there's a lot of unpaid labor in my industry, which also should be valued at the real price. Same as climate and sustainability investments should be priced in to travel. So yeah, the current situation is really helping things to go in the right direction, to my opinion. So that again, that's a blessing in disguise. because the future and near future of travel is unfortunately that travel is becoming more exclusive, more for the elite. And yes, that's very sad that some people can no longer travel to Turkey for 200 euros. But everybody knows that that is not a realistic price. So that's immensely important that we really should start offering things which have a realistic price. And is this right or wrong? Yeah, let's go back to the beginning. I think less is more. That's why I talk today to you about degrowth in business. And is travel a luxury or a necessity? I would like to go into discussion later on about that. But this is my story for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elske. It's very interesting to hear your perspective, not only on the effect that business can have on the climate, but also on social issues, like you mentioned, the slavery on cruise ships. That's very concerning, and we had that. We learned that during the first session as well. Jason Hickel spent quite a lot of time talking about social equity and degrowth. So that's very interesting. Thank you very much. Our next speaker, Cécile van Oppen, we're very eager to hear from you. You are the co-founder of Copper 8. So yeah, take it away, the floor is yours.
Well, hello everyone, and it's nice to be with you, albeit digitally today. And like Elske, there was actually a moment in my life where all this degrowth business, if you will, started. And I actually want to take you back to 2011. You know, I'm in my late 20s, and I'm working in one of Amsterdam's business districts at a very small boutique consultancy. And I actually managed to change the strategy of this company from knowledge management to sustainability a few years before, built on a burning passion of mine to use business for good, to actually use capitalism to make a positive change. But something started to change, because the more successful the company and I as a consultant became, success obviously here being measured in the revenues generated by me and the company, so it was purely financial, the more the company's business model started to kind of eat away at me. And I was working approximately 60 to 80 hours a week, but I was willing to make that sacrifice because I was, working these 60 to 80 hours to make the world a better place. But at the same time, I started to feel that the company's growth was really becoming an imperative rather than having a function or the result of having a clear vision. The office was expanded to an extra floor, and we were sitting in a pretty high-rise building in Amsterdam, and so high that we could actually look into the boardroom of ABN AMRO, so which was actually a very interesting time, because that was when they were also being taken over and everything. But it also literally portrayed the hierarchy as being on top of the world. And the interesting thing is that with this growth, something really started to change within the company, because when I joined the company, it was, I think I was maybe the 10th employee, and we had now grown to the size, we were over 30, 35, and growth became an imperative. And whereas the company had always had great talent in identifying rough diamonds in people, they were now being hired and fired as simple resources. As consultants, we were also increasingly asked to sort of fuel this growth by just selling, and almost selling just anything rather than selling a clear vision or working on projects that only had a societal goal. And this was all, of course, to maintain the growth that we had. And the interesting thing is that I, as an individual, was also asked to work on projects that were so unaligned with my vision on sustainability that I was actually doing strategic work for an oil and gas company. So I was really feeling like I was selling my soul to the devil, if you will. And this growing unrest about the company's business model had kind of translated into physical stomach pains. And then there was a point that I just literally couldn't take it anymore. And it turns out it wasn't just a mental thing, because I had a gigantic tumor in my right ovary, which was causing this pain. Luckily, it turned out to be benign, but those first 24 hours where I wasn't sure if I was going to live, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to give life, were really life-changing for me, because all my thinking about alternative business models for the consultancy industry really started to materialize. I think for about 2 years at that time, I had ongoing conversations with my now business partner on what an alternative business model could look like. And all these what ifs that we had discussed frequently started to become real when I was lying in the hospital. And it was long, long before I became proficient in this idea of degrowth as a scientific concept. It was really just a feeling inside of me that I thought the way we're doing business now just isn't right. It isn't human. It isn't aligned with my vision on sustainability. And when we started Cooperate almost 10 years ago, we were very clear on the two goals we had. The first goal was to do impactful projects. So we will only take on work that leads to positive impact. The thing is, though, we believe that consultants will be redundant in time. We also believe that at this point of the transition, we're very necessary as a lever to a more sustainable world. And the second thing was to create a new benchmark for the consultancy industry, and maybe even services firms as a whole. Because basically what we did is we took everything that gave us stomach pains and we turned it 180 degrees to basically challenge the traditional business model of consulting firms. And by doing so, we actually kind of became a little degrowth experiment in ourselves. And this frustration that we had from working in Amsterdam's business district actually fueled creation. And now you're probably wondering, of course, lovely story, but what does this look like? How do you degrow a consulting firm? And I just want to highlight a couple of points that we had, and maybe you have more questions on this later. But the first thing is, and it's a very clear boundary that we set when we were making the firm, is we will never grow larger than 15 consultants. And the interesting thing is that by doing so, we're actually affirming our mission to be the pioneers of the circular economy. Because what we basically do is we identify important topics, we become really, really good at them, and then we write down all our knowledge and give that open source for even all our competitors to read on and become proficient in, but ideally, of course, our clients, because what we want to do is build capacity within organizations to also become stewards of the transition. That's one. The second thing is that aside from writing down everything that we know, we work very actively towards our own redundancy. So in our client relationships, we actively transfer our knowledge to our clients. So to just use one Dutch phrase for the Dutch-speaking people out there, we call this our philosophy of voordoen, nadoen, zelf doen. So we really want to make sure that our clients can work without us. But also in general terms, we work towards our redundancy. So we ask ourselves the question at least once a year, are we still relevant? And are we still having fun? And in that sense, we're actually the only good example of planned obsolescence, I'd like to say, because we really want to plan in our own obsolescence. Thirdly, we're very, very selective on the clients that we take on. We're not scared to say no. And we even believe that sometimes no is the greatest wake-up call that we can give to a client who isn't intrinsically motivated to make a change. We're happy to see that happen as well. And impact here trumps our revenues. So sometimes clients who we've said no to will, of course, never come back because they find us, a weird type of consultancy firm that would say no. But others really come in motion. They become maybe also frustrated, which then leads to creation. And they come back to us and thank us for our honesty, or start working with us 2 years later, because then they realized that we weren't triggered by their passion for sustainability. We have long-term relationships with our clients, but it's not always a financial relationship. So what you see in traditional consultancy is that long-term relationships there's always a transaction between the client and the consulting firm. With us, we actually see that we have long-term relationships, but the financial transactions actually stop after a fairly short amount of time. But we still maintain the relationship because these clients are actually super happy with the capacity building that we've been working on. Then on a more organizational level, we actually have no external finances, and we will never also have them. My business partners and I own all of the shares, which, by the way, is also one of the biggest mistakes. So I'd definitely like to encourage you to ask me a question on that later, because yeah, it's something that I've really learned in the past few years. But the core is really we're not extractive. So yes, we do have revenues. We even have sometimes, not always, a profit. But the profit is not extractive. So it stays in the company to make a sustainable business. And what we also do is, and which is also the reason why we don't always have a profit, is we invest our margins that we make on consulting to actually answer the questions that are obviously all there, but that there's no single paying client for. So a lot of these questions also pertain to the economic system. So, for example, how can a tax shift help accelerate the transition to the circular economy? Or how come product as a service isn't currently a revenue generating model? So we do a lot of this research, basically fueled or paid for from our own margins, because we find it important and because we know that if we don't do it, no one's going to do this type of work, whereas it is necessary. And finally, rather than being organized like a pyramid, which is what most consulting firms look like, you know, there's a couple of bosses on the top and there's a lot of workforce on the bottom, which are the human resources, if you will. We're more like a pancake. So we actually have almost an equal amount of seasoned professionals and younger individuals who have just entered the job market. And our pay gap is less than 2 to 1. I think it's about 1.3 to 1. We don't distinguish fees based on seniority, because we believe that everyone has something to bring onto a project, and maybe even that the younger people have more to bring because we're talking about their future. They realize that they have to live in that future. Not that I'm super old. I mean, I only just turned 40. But, you know, we are talking about their future, so we don't think we should fee them less. And most importantly, one of the things that really irked me from the company I worked at before is people were really used as human resources. And I actually hate that word, because they are people. They are not resources. They are people that we need to treat as people. And I think that what you really see is in our company, people are happy. I heard someone say yesterday when we were having a discussion with a potential colleague, he said, you know, I'm actually being taken care of. And I think that's exactly what we want to do, is we want to bring other values back into the economy, the value of happiness, of different values. And that is really the thing, that by building this company, I will never be rich in monetary terms, but I'm extremely rich in the things that can't be stolen, because I have a wonderful team surrounding me. We're doing things that matter. And that is really what keeps me going. So I like to think that my bank account of karma points is super high. And the thing is, I could really talk hours and hours and hours on our vision of building a different services model and or different services industry. But the essence is that oftentimes the services industry is left out of the whole climate discussion, because we like to focus on the big polluters. So we look at Tata Steel or Shell, and we look at them because their footprint is visible and measurable. But I also think that the consulting industry is a huge client of these big polluters. And because of the 60 to 80 hour work weeks, we also, the consulting industry is fueling this as well. So I think that we shouldn't leave out the services industry, even though we like to think that there's little impact there because it's only the travel that we use or the paper that we use. And I couldn't help but wonder, what if I take those what ifs back from how I created the company? What if one of the big consultancies would operate on our type of vision? Would we then accelerate more rapidly to the world we all want to be living in? What if they would say no to clients who aren't really willing to change? And what if their partners weren't in it for the big bucks, but would live like me, thinking that you just want to do good? And what if they would be willing to invest not only their profits, but also their power in changing the economic system? Wouldn't we arrive at the world we all want to be living in. And the thing is, even though currently, even after 10 years, we don't have a huge following in competitors taking on our type of business model, I still believe it's possible. And I hope there will be more momentum. And so should you really, because you're never too small to make a change. And the only thing I want to share with you is I hope that you don't need a drastic life event to make that change, because it is really what accelerated the thinking for me is, you know, what if there is no tomorrow? What would I do? And I hope you don't need that to make a change.
Thank you very much, Cécile, for that very personal account of your experiences with this type of doing business. Yeah, really inspiring story.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah. Just because the online audience was supposed to finish at 5, we'll continue the whole session till 5:30, just because they've been waiting. I'll start with an online question, if that's all right. So we had a nice question. Someone came in very early at 20 to 3. Extra early, with the question, how can we effectively communicate degrowth across the population, particularly towards the older generation? And they've added, climate communication, especially through scientific and activist agents, is rightly communicated via agency, necessity, and fear. Yet, even as an activist myself, I feel like we must develop a diverse communication mechanism targeted at different segments of society. Quite a mouthful, but I thought maybe you guys would have a very interesting take on this.
Yeah, I agree on the question of fear, because recently I was with a set of entrepreneurs, serial entrepreneurs, trying to invest in new companies, and oftentimes the new entrepreneur was pitching for us, starting with fear, and I have no problem with that, because I'm used to how young people think and what their urgency is. But my colleague serial entrepreneurs, they said, "Oh no, I hated this fear story. I'm not aligned." So yeah, it's very important to maybe start to seduce in a softer way. That's also what I did with my book, telling the story of these 15 contagious, maybe sweet girls at the service, but making small steps in the right direction. And that's, I think, also what Cécile was saying. She's also moving towards this in smaller steps, but she's moving into the right direction.
Yeah, Cécile, did you have a take on that as well?
Yes, I definitely do. And I think, you know, I think that on the one hand, the science around degrowth is still sort of underground. And I'm really happy that Jason Hickel wrote this book. And I don't know if everyone noticed, but we actually, we had, for Prinsjesdag, we created a hat inspired by Jason Hickel's book. And one of the party members of the Partij voor de Dieren was supposed to wear it, but she ended up not wearing it. But the interesting thing is, by not wearing it, it actually made Jinek. So we were really happy with that. And now we're trying to make that hat sort of a rotating thing. But I think that we need different ways of communicating the message. And I think the science needs to get out there more. I also think we need to use arts. And the interesting thing is Jason Hickel is actually going to be at Brainwash Festival on Sunday as well. So there, the arts are also, you know, we're using arts as well. And I think we also kind of need to create more of a movement, because there are a lot of people who are into degrowth thinking, but we're not all connected yet. And that makes it kind of seems like we're all individuals calling for degrowth, whereas I think the movement is bigger than we think.
That's very interesting to create more of a web of degrowth thinkers in a way. Yeah. Right. Did you have a thought on that as well, Egbert?
Yeah, well, the first thing what came to my mind, I mean, is, yeah, we can of course design a completely new communication strategy, but on the other hand, we already know a lot. We know already that that we need to combat CO2 emissions, that we need to reduce resource consumption. We already know that, and many people are already aware And my question then is, when should we stop creating awareness while so many people are already aware of what we actually need to do? And so it can also be a bit of a disguise or a facade behind which you can hide to not have to do anything. So my my drive would be to already create action in this field, even if it's only small, but just get started. And that's also why I'm very happy with creating a movement. I will also have a meeting with one of the members of the Representatives Council here at Hanze, to see if we can actually also create that movement here at our university. And not only students, but also lecturers that came to me. So after the meeting, the event with Jason, and they asked me, well, how can we join in? So my suggestion would be, let's simply get started, and we may not have a blueprint of what exactly to do, but together I think we can get a long way.
Good little segue to the next lecture. That's going to be on education. So degrowth and education. If you are interested in how we can start this movement in the educational setting, there's a flyer here up front. Just in terms of time, I'd like to take a question from the audience. Is there anyone who has an interesting question for our speakers today? Yeah?
Yes, Elske. We live in a time that we hear a lot about us around us getting richer, getting not richer. And if travel is only for the rich people, how can travel agencies, so buying agencies, how can we?
Sorry, she can't really hear you very well, so I'm just gonna. I just got a message.
Great. Take your time.
There you go. Can I test it?
Do it again?
I don't know. Could you hear anything? Could you hear the question or so far, or?
No, it's very hard, but I understand is because travel is becoming more elite, how can travel agencies survive? Is that more or less the question in short?
No, if travel only is for the elite, then the poor people, I do het in Dutch, als reizen alleen nog voor de elite is en de armere mensen kunnen niet meer reizen, dan krijg je een nog grotere kloof tussen arm en rijk. En volgens mij is dat niet hoe wij een welzijnsmaatschappij met degrowth willen faciliteren. Dus hoe kunnen we ervoor zorgen dat zowel reizen ook voor de armere als de rijkere mensen geborgd blijft? Ja. En daarmee zeg ik niet dat we allemaal massaal naar Zuid-Azië moeten reizen met onze backpack op de rug. Maar wel dat reizen zowel voor arm als rijk mogelijk is. Want anders zal die kloof en ook de weerstand in de maatschappij alleen maar groter worden. En zal degrowth nooit slagen, denk ik.
Yeah, there's a big friction. I agree. What's happening now in travel by natural development because of shortages, regulation, is that travel is becoming more exclusive. But how can you keep travel accessible is, I think, also by giving carbon budgets to people to travel. So that means that everybody has the possibility to travel and you can make your own choices. I think also we have to decrease the number of trips we do per year. Especially very wealthy people travel nearly every month of the year. If we have a carbon budget, that becomes limited. And then it stays also accessible for less affluent people. But yes, there is a big inequality going on in this world, not only in travel, but on several topics. And that is a big challenge right now.
Any other questions from the room? Anyone here? Not yet. I also want to ask Elske and Cécile, maybe you have a question for each other.
I'm quite curious about your mission with all the consulting companies who work for this, for instance, oil companies or Tata Steels. Did you ever confront them with your vision? Because I really like it.
Yes, actually I have. I won't mention the name because I don't think that's very nice, but we were actually approached by a fairly large consultancy last year. They were kind of looking to do a takeover. And of course, we never want to be taken over because we want to maintain control over our own organization and we don't want extractive finance. But I still chose to take that moment to still engage in a conversation with them because I hope to kind of inspire them to take on a more sort of activist role. And I did actually share with them my idea of how can you use your position as a large consulting firm, international consulting firm, to be more proactive in the organizations that you want to help transition, such as, you know, IT organizations, etc. But also, how can you say no to organizations that you don't want to help in their incremental sort of changes? But sadly, I was kind of laughed away.
Oh, okay.
But you know, maybe it
you
needs,
planted the seed.
A couple of months, and it might grow at some point. But in a good sense, develop. I would like to say. But at that point, they thought I was crazy.
Similar reaction as I had in the travel industry.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
But how do you respond to that? Because you're very passionate about what you're doing, and then someone else says, well, what you're doing is actually crazy.
I'm pretty open about. I mean, I'm not going to sit there crying, but I am open about the emotions that I have by translating them to words. So I did say that I was disappointed that, you know, they did want to talk to me about basically buying my company to add to their portfolio because they thought it was interesting to have sustainability in their portfolio, but they weren't willing to actually realize what's going on in the world and put themselves in a position where they could use their position for a positive change. And that obviously the answer is no if you want to buy my company, which was no long before we went into discussion. But, you know, I was clear about that. And I also confronted them with, do you have kids and aren't you worried for their future? I don't know if I haven't heard from them since.
Probably they're making babies
hopefully they're
now.
no longer working there. No, I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you.
A question from someone in the audience who had asked me this question earlier today but might not know it. How do you deal with the existential despair that comes with fearing for the future and having such there is a very bleak outline. There was another message in the news today that there's no viable way currently to make the 1.5 aim goal, how the Earth is heating up. You are very passionate about what you do. It comes across very well, but obviously passion also comes with the disappointment when people around you don't feel the same way. How do you handle that?
Oh, it can be extremely difficult because 2 years ago I decided to travel by train to the south of France in the summer. It was August, and my husband had been severely ill, so we decided to travel only for a couple of days with our kids, and we decided to book quite a luxury hotel because it was only for a couple of days. And then suddenly I was confronted with all these sheikhs and emirs from Kuwait and Dubai who were spending millions in a couple of weeks being there. And I was really feeling so bad viewing them and seeing them and having no awareness with their whole slavery around them, because that was also visible. So that made me really sad, and I also wrote about it. I frequently write blogs for also The Ondernemer, which is an online entrepreneurial platform, and I write about experiences like this. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Cécile?
Yeah, I have to admit it's really difficult because on the one hand, I am an optimist, and I think if I would give up, even partially, I couldn't do what I do, because I see it as my mission to sort of make other people also positively excited about what they can do to make a positive change. Because like what Elske said, the negative route, I don't think it always leads to the innovation that we need, even if it's social innovation, to make a change. So I believe we need to show what is possible. We need to be optimistic in that regard, but I would be lying if I said I'm optimistic 100% of the time. I have a little 2-year-old walking around here, and I often wonder, what is his future going to look like? And when I was traveling to the south of France last week, I always have this when I actually go abroad on vacation, which is why I don't like to go abroad on vacation. We were traveling by EV, by car. In the Netherlands, I have this idea that, I'm having an impact because I talk to people in government, I talk to businesses, and I kind of feel that I have an impact, there's influence. And as soon as I cross the border, it kind of just fades away. And it actually haunts me. So I don't like going abroad on vacation, because it's kind of like, I don't have an impact here, and it's too big, and I'm so little. And it's really, it's heavy. It's heavy, but I kind of try to think, there's Cécile's in France as well. It's a French name. They will be doing their thing there. And if we just all do what we can, and we will make a change.
It's also extremely important, because it's quite easy to spend time with people who also believe in this, but it's more important to spend time with people who are not believers and try to persuade them to start viewing things differently, and then after maybe understanding it, also to start doing things differently. This summer I was visiting, for instance, Page Lake Powell, and you have 2 artificial lakes out of the Colorado River, which lost over 20 years. They lost 20 meters of water, and maybe in 5 years the lakes are dried out and they cannot supply any electricity anymore. And a guide who I had during a tour looking at the lake, he was very concerned about what was happening. And he kept on, during the tour, talking about the urgency to understand, and he was showing the effects of climate change to us. And I think, it can be confronting, but you see it and you really think you have to do something. If you are a non-believer, I think it's impossible that you are shying away from it.
In a way, if you take examples like this, travel can actually help to awaken people to the realness of these issues at hand. Like you said, if you see a dried up lake, you're going to be a bit more convinced, I think.
Elske, if I may, I would like to go back to the question that you started out with.
Yeah.
Because you made 2 statements. Or not
Yes.
really a question, but more a statement. And the first statement was, travel is a luxury which conflicts with degrowth. And the second was, travel is a necessity which does not conflict with degrowth. That's how you started out with. Now, I'm an economist, and I was always taught that travel is a luxury. Now, if travel is a luxury, then it conflicts with degrowth. And just also coming back what you just mentioned, about the lake and the effects of climate change, there might be a point where you simply have to quit your business simply because of the effects it has on the planet. Would you then be willing to give up?
That's a heavy question.
Yes. I already, my company was stopped because of a pandemic, and it can be stopped again because as long as we eat meat, potentially we can have more severe pandemics. So that is a scenario that this easily can happen again. And yes, that's a scenario, that I have to stop because climate is conflicting with what I do. Yeah.
And
that's why I'm moving to closer travel because that's already a sort of an exit strategy.
Well, I'd love to try and put this question to the audience as well.
Right.
Can we raise hands for either luxury or necessity? So let's start with luxury. Who thinks that travel is a luxury? All right. Wow. And
quite a lot.
Any brave people who want to say that travel is a necessity? Wow. Okay.
But would they give up their holidays?
And what is
that's
travel?
That's a good point.
I think the
That's
definition here is actually interesting because I like to go to this south of Limburg, which is still 2.5 hours for me. But is that
let's define it more precisely. So for over 60 years, leisure travel abroad is for many people accessible in the Netherlands, in Europe. And a lot of those people feel this is like a right, that they have a holiday at least once a year, preferably abroad. Is this a right, or is this a need, or is this a luxury? And how would we feel if this is taken away from us?
Yeah, that's a good question to think about. Yeah.
Well, that's indeed a good question.
Yeah. So I've got 2 questions from the audience. I think we've let's start with you on the left here from me. I got in the pink shirt.
Thank you, and thank you both for very inspiring introductions to what you're doing. And I have a question about the movements, the thing that Egbert also mentioned. What we see is 2 examples of entrepreneurs taking first steps and being an example and being inspiring. What we really need, while time is running out, is an industry-wide movement. So my guess is we will need industry branch organizations who take the lead in this. And in both of your stories, we could listen about competitors taking a very different route. So how do you feel about getting all the industry moving and getting into collective action? What kind of leadership would be needed in the branch organizations?
Good question.
Yeah. Just a quick note, it is almost 5:30, so we will be ending the live stream soon, but I will let you answer this question.
Cécile, maybe you take initiative?
I would definitely like to start. I mean, I think that my business partner and I both hoped that we would have more following by now. We are actually writing a book about this because we do want to sort of share a story and hope that might make a change. In the meanwhile, I'm not super hopeful that the transition in the services industry will be on the very short term, because if there's one industry that's super extractive, it is the services industry, because there's lots of partner structures and the partners make all the money and the younger people do a lot of the work. But we are transferring this to our clients. So we are working with listed companies, other large companies in the Netherlands on undercover degrowth strategies. And I think that's where I'm putting my money maybe first. they will maybe make a change, because once they start to make a change, the other consulting companies will maybe see this and then say, oh, maybe we should wake up to this movement. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid it is 5:30, so we'll have to end it, but we do have a borrel outside, so all the other questions that you might still have, we can just continue the discussion outside. Thank you very much to our speakers, Elske, Doets and Cécile van Oppen today. If you guys would like to join us for the next one, it's on the 24th of November at 4 o'clock.